It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker.
Yo, man. Boom, it's Rusty. What's up, everyone? It is Thursday, but today's the last day for me for this week. So I have this show, one more show, and then I'm taking a few days off. Gonna go do some Rusty shit, you know? So yeah, welcome to the Public Access Podcast, the podcast here on the Quantum Global Broadcasting Network, QGBN. And check out other great shows on the network, such as When the Gloves Come Off, the Thinking Man's Pro Wrestling Podcast. This is it with Lizzie and Saved by the Bend. And this show is brought to you by Fred Ben Savage as Fuck, Stoner Eats Productions, Hardcore and Entertainment, Hypnosis is Great, and Sock 'em Up. And if you want to check out Sock 'em Up, it's a nonprofit, sockemup.org. And you guys, call in, leave a message, 503-974-6420, or maybe you don't like messages and you're like,
messages? We don't need no stinking messages.
but I need messages. So send me messages, 503-974-6420. So today we have on a special guest, and I've already been talking to her. We got talking about Minnesota stuff. Minnesota, I don't know. I have fond memories of Minnesota, even more fond memories of Iowa. So I might bring up Iowa. I probably will. Probably not talking about Iowa for a half hour here. So let's bring on our special guest. And shit, I forgot to ask how to pronounce her name. So I'm gonna try on this. So maybe I'll do a fill in the blank. We have Terra, and then your last name was pronounced because I forgot because I'm a bad host.
I do it all the time. Thanks for asking. It's very phonetic. Carbert.
Carbert. Okay, Terra Carbert. So there we go. I didn't even get through my checklist. I was too excited talking about Minnesota here. And yeah, so
Like, well,
So
maybe
you-
we should probably record something, huh?
yeah, that's what I was like, I better just stop this here. We better just get to it now. And so you were saying you went to Paisley Park back in the 90s. And so what was that like?
I mean, it was just it was fun. Like, if you think about the, in my early 20s, I think about kind of that energy that sometimes comes for a lot of people at that age. You go out to the nightclub and then it closes and everyone's like, well, what do we do? And a couple times it turned out like, well, hey, let's go to Paisley Park. I know somebody who knows somebody who can get us in. And it was sometimes like an after party gathering place for musicians and people who love music.
So you went into that part that's the big old, I don't know what you call it, a venue, I guess. It's like
Yeah, I guess
basically,
at the time, I think it felt more like a studio vibe, but
yeah.
I haven't been back. Like I was saying, like I haven't been since they turned it into a museum. It'd be fun to walk through it. And frankly, I might not have been in the sober state at the time.
Right. I mean, well, what do you expect?
These aren't really clear.
Yeah. I don't know. It was pretty cool. My mom flew into town to come visit and went and took her there. And yeah, it was cool. The best part about it is when you go in, they make you put your camera or your phone, your camera into like a lockbox at the front, and you get it when you leave. So that's pretty cool. I like that. So I felt like there wasn't a lot of times where, I had someone standing in front of something waiting to take a picture that I was trying to look at. But I mean, yeah, it's like the Graceland of the Midwest.
Yes.
Is what it's
That would be a
become.
very, very good way to put it.
So, I mean, what was it like when you went in there, like the first time? Just You're like,
I
oh yeah,
honest
let's go
I
in
mean,
there. And
seriously, Rusty, I I
it
don't
was
really remember. I mean, I just remember like it was fun and we partied and there was music and everyone was having a good time. I could probably tell you more about who I was with than I could about the actual experience itself.
who were you with?
I was with some of my best girlfriends having the time of my life.
Are
I
and
can even tell you what I was wearing. Like
what
it's such a
you can
weird
remember what
thing.
you were wearing, but not what was going on at Paisley Park.
Oh man, human memories are weird, aren't they?
Yeah, what were you wearing?
I was wearing a very fitted dress that was shorter than my father approved of. It was navy blue and it had like flowers, kind of a 60-esque vibe, if you will.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so when I mean it's okay, so you went there, you don't
I really don't.
I mean, so
I'm sure we danced, we sang, we laughed. Hopefully no
Were-
one cried.
were any of you musicians?
I had a couple friends who were just really into kind of the local Twin Cities music scene. So they weren't necessarily musicians, but they really liked to go to, there's this place that's actually still here called Bunkers a lot. And a lot of musicians, get a start in the Twin Cities market at Bunkers and get a regular following, get a regular show there. And if I remember right, this is like back when Kid Johnny Lang was just kind of starting to hit the scene. And Prince, that's my son in the background. Prince, if I remember correctly, I think he was a partial owner of Bunkers or he maybe was a silent partner, something to do. And every now and then he'd make a random show, he'd just show up and get on the keyboard or get on the drums and then leave. Like he wouldn't say anything, he would just come play. So it's kind of like a little cameo appearance every now and then from him there.
That sounds like him.
So the girls I was hanging out with, I'd say they were much more connected to the music scene than I was. And I was a single mom from a young age. So my nights out used to kind of get a little wild. I'd go cut loose every now and then when I wasn't in charge of mom. And
when do you have your first kid?
I only have one, and I was
so that's your kid.
That's my kid. Yeah, he's
Okay.
He's in the middle of transitioning from one home to another right now. Me too. I'm about to move, and I was 22 when I had him.
Wow.
Mhm.
And so this was all in Minneapolis
Mhm.
area. Okay.
Yeah, born and raised here, never left.
I understand why. And so I saw recently, because I still like my Google on my phone still does Minnesota stuff. And I saw actually, it's might have been about a year ago. One of the guys, I think on channel 11 was going through the old news stuff, and they found this video of Prince as a kid, which
Cool.
was wild. He was like 10 or 11, and there was like some school strike, I think. And he was a student that went to this school and was talking about it. And someone saw the video and they're like, is that Prince? And
And it was?
yeah, and like one of his friends, I forgot what he called his friend's name, but they interviewed him. He's like, oh yeah, we used to call Prince whatever. I forgot what the name he called Prince too, but it's not the greatest story, I guess. But yeah,
okay.
it's something that's up there on the internet that came out, and
I might look for it. I have to go hunting for the news. I don't really pay attention to it.
I don't either. Especially like I was saying, like once a few years ago happened, I already wasn't paying attention, but then like no news for me. That was all off. All my social media stuff was all off. Unfollow everyone. I didn't like once I started seeing stuff with, everyone had an opinion about everything. And it's like, all right, okay, I see where this is going. And I
It's
just
super interesting. I did the
backed
same.
right out. You did the same?
Yeah, right around that. I mean, we're talking about it before we hopped on the actual recording. I'm in Minneapolis. You were in Minnesota at the time, and we're talking about like May of 2020. So we're in lockdown, and George Floyd was murdered, as the courts have revealed as well.
Right.
And it was a really, really, really tough time for us as a nation also. And I think politically there was a lot of tension already happening. And the more and more I looked at the news and my social feeds and I was like, man, like so many of us agree on so much. And here we are just consistently disagreeing. And it was emotionally unhealthy for me to get in it. And I'd sometimes notice myself like getting really mad about someone else's opinion, and I'm like, okay, I guess
Right.
it's just not a good use of my energy. It doesn't allow me to be the best version of myself. Like, how can I protect my mental well-being while there's a lot of chaos happening in the world? And what do I choose as a human on the planet to do, as opposed to engage in fights with strangers on the internet? So I unfollowed everybody.
Yeah.
I've actually restarted some social, but being very mindful of like, I'm here for this. And now it's very much focused around what I'm trying to do professionally, or I'm there to research, or I'm there for a support group or a collective, an entrepreneur group or a podcast group, like where we met. So
Yeah.
it's very intentional use of social media now versus previously. It was probably a bit more like, oh, let me just, distract myself.
Yeah. That's kind of how mine went too. And it was, I had the podcast group. I had garage sale stuff that was going on, whatever was, garage sale groups. And then I had like a group that does like Mike Judge stuff, like Beavis and Butthead and all that.
Yeah.
That was it. That was my feed. Cause like with entertainment stuff, was difficult. And I saw that one coming fast. And there were a lot of people who stopped getting booked if they weren't whatever side whoever was on.
Yeah. My son and I had an
It-
interesting discussion about this the other day. Like, who's the they? Like, maybe can we really define who they is, right? Because
right.
it's all of us in some way, regardless of where we are on this spectrum.
Yeah. And it became a lot of more of there's 99 things that we agree on, but there's this one thing we don't agree on. That's the division in the sand. Fuck off. Your life is over. And that's what I started seeing with some of my really good friends just gone because they had one different opinion about what was going on with this. Like go after them, like put them on the news, make their lives fucking end, basically their livelihood end. And it was both ways.
It's a weird emerging behavior pattern. And I guess it's not new, right? I mean,
right.
quote unquote cancellation, as we probably call it today, has existed for a long time. But the way it shows up on social media and the amount of media we now have access to. I mean, you have a podcast. I like anyone can have a media format, right? You have a podcast. I have a podcast. Like, well, many of us entrepreneurs have websites. We all get to state our opinion, right? And so we're inundated with a lot of that. And I, in my very dream world, like, can't we all just sit down and let's talk about that one thing and like seek to understand how each other came to form that viewpoint and calmly explain our viewpoint and look at how do we make a difference together on the 99 things we agree upon.
Right. Which is something that I had a conversation with one of my friends a whole bunch about, like, that just being able to have discussions was, again, something you can't do. It's like, I don't even want to talk to this person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's making the most impact on the division of people, was saying like that there's nothing to talk about there. What is there to talk about? And
You're wrong.
yeah.
I'm right. end. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
the end.
yeah.
And I'm like, well, okay, but why? What did
But
you
you're
do?
my
What?
fellow human on the planet.
Right.
We have
And
to live together.
we both love a lot of the same things, but
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
one
It's
thing.
maybe it's an age thing that we get this perspective because I probably used to be guilty of a bit of that myself. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
I think I did.
you're not
I
my
did
people.
too.
Bye.
Yep. And I like, yeah, I'm talking about that too. Like, yeah, when I was in, my 20s or because like the first time, like with political shit, the
Mhm.
first election that I had was the 2001 with all that stuff going on. And like, so then there was division with that. Like, oh yeah, I don't want to, there was someone's a fucking whatever. And yeah,
It's
no, I'm just
always
like, oh,
happened.
it
It's
was
just like we
dumb.
just see so much more of it because there's so much more media and so much more we see much more of it. Where those are conversations people used to have face to face more often. People weren't, talking to strangers on the internet. They were talking to strangers, in the church basement or at the city town hall or at their kids' baseball game.
Right.
And I'm using that because, of course, I went to a lot of baseball games because my kid played baseball. But whatever it is, where humans gathered, those conversations were happening in real life and with body language and eye contact and probably a little bit more empathy and sensitivity.
I think so too. Yeah, it's real easy to, you know, beat down a faceless entity
Yeah.
as opposed to like, yeah, I don't know if people would do that if someone was right up in their face and saying that. Maybe they would, but
My guess would be some, right? Probably the
yeah,
exception more than the rule. Yeah.
right.
It's funny the 2000 election, was that the year? I'm Googling over here.
That was the hanging Chad year of
Yeah.
Bush and Gore and Ralph Nader.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about a local election here in the Twin Cities because that's the first one I voted in was I don't remember if it was 2000 or if it was before that.
Was
Jesse
that the Jesse Ventura one in
Yeah.
St. Louis
Yeah.
Park or Brooklyn
Yeah.
Park?
Brooklyn Park. And I was going to school at North Hennepin Community College here. Great school with a program to transfer to a 4-year institution. Yeah, it was 2020. His college campaign was insane and it definitely got out the vote for me. And I mentioned being a single mom. My son was 2 at the time, and I was like, I didn't qualify for support with daycare by like $100 a year. It was ridiculous. And he had made some promises around tuition stuff and whatever. And well, unfortunately, broken promises. I think that was my first lesson in broken promises from politicians.
Yeah. Yep.
But it was so because there was such buzz about him running, and my dad was a wrestling fan. And so there were all these reasons for me to vote for Jesse Ventura at the time without really knowing how to be a truly informed voter.
Yeah. I mean, it was a wild bet, even like going there however many years, like 4 or 5 years ago, being there and then just there's still some people that are still hanging around from those days of
Sure.
the old wrestling scene from back there. And it was kind of cool. And then, yeah, hearing stories like that, one of the guys who was actually, so both the guys that were, how do I put that? Okay. So when I got trained, like the guys that trained me had a school and they had just stopped the school. And then the students kind of took over like a year prior because one of the guys had died.
Like a
But-
wrestling school?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. But so then they both got their start back up in Minnesota. So then I getting to hear, like going there and hearing stories from what they said, as opposed to like stories that I heard from like what it was like, what they were like in Portland. And, it was interesting. It was a good, good way to get to know everyone there. And so, I don't know. Yeah, it was a cool spot. I really did like it. And I mean, I was this close to getting a place in Iowa before we moved like that close, and then ended up job took us out to Salt Lake City,
Okay.
and that was
I've never
wild.
been. I've only driven
Yeah,
through it.
yeah, you're good. You're good. I moved there from there. I was there, I think after about 6 months, I was ready to go. And
Okay.
so
No offense
yeah.
to those of you who love Salt Lake City and
Nope,
live there.
nope. One of the most beautiful places in the world.
I will say that was my experience driving through, but not even to stop. It was like a quick run
Yep,
with a friend. Yeah.
That's all you need. Just see
Okay.
it and
See it.
go through.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, Iowa, I just like with the Iowa didn't shut down or anything at all. Didn't have any masks or anything. Iowa, so even like where I was in Austin, which is 15 minutes north of the border, it was kind of half what was going on there with that. But yeah, go down to Iowa and but I mean like the prices for, I was gonna get a house with a little bit of property, and then I was gonna get a like a building, and I was going to make it like a flea market. And yeah, I mean, what I would have paid for that, I think it was, yeah, like just, I mean, yeah, what stuff costs here compared to what I could have gotten there. And
Oh, you mean
yeah,
where you are now? Yeah.
yeah,
Like price per square foot on everything is a little different in Iowa.
yeah, yeah. And I was like, all right. Yeah, so it was fun. I liked it a lot there, and I liked the vibe of everything there very much. And keep hearing like, oh, you're gonna have to come back there and buying a house just one day, just leave it. And I'm gonna like get a notice like, oh, bye, I went to Iowa to go buy a house. See you later. You can come if you want, but that's where I am. And I don't know. I do miss that spot. I miss
The Midwest.
the Midwest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, I don't know. There's just something that clicked with me. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I had a lot of family that was living in Iowa. A lot of, I don't know, kind of not sort of distant relatives, but then there's still
Sure.
some that are there. But yeah, like my mom wanted me to go to this cemetery where a whole bunch of them were buried, and like, I want to see if you feel anything over there, but I didn't feel
Aw.
anything. I'm like, oh, it doesn't feel like much. But something else in Iowa though made me feel
There was a
very
pull.
much at home. Yeah.
Yeah. Is your mom pretty spiritual?
No, she's religious, so I guess, yeah. So
Okay.
and
That's an interesting way of phrasing it for somebody who's not like into
yeah, that's what I thought too.
energy, quote unquote. Yeah. I want to see if you feel something.
She probably was talking to me and was saying it how I would phrase it if I was going to
Okay. Using
tell
your
her that,
language.
would be using my language. And
Cool.
but yeah, I mean, I felt more when I went to I guess even when I went to Cincinnati and when I went to New York, when I got here, which was weird because the last time I was in New York was 1987. And so it's been a few years.
Just a couple.
And yeah, I remember like the place. All I remember the place smelling like piss, and I remember people breakdancing and thought that breakdancing was the coolest thing. 1987,
As
like,
it is, it's still the coolest thing. Why aren't people
Yeah.
still breakdancing on the corners?
right. And I was like, all right. But then I get there and like, yeah, I'm from Portland, Oregon, and
Okay.
like I'm like, New York looks better than Portland, Oregon. It looks better than any West Coast city right now. Any city, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, looks better than all those cities now. It was really bizarre. But like when I moved from Minneapolis, I was thinking like, I don't want to be really by a city anymore. And so like when I got to, because before I left Portland, I moved out to Boring, Oregon, which is the name of a town, actually. Actually, I lived in a town that was called Damascus, but like a year or two prior, there was so much corruption in the city that the city council decided to disband the whole city, and then it just became incorporated into Boring. So
It doesn't sound like it was appropriately named. City
yeah,
corruption is not boring.
right. Yeah, so that's where I was. I had chickens and goats out there, and it was cool. But then then I went to Salt Lake City, and I was living in South Central Salt Lake City, and I was like, I don't want this anymore. And then I came out here, and I'm in the suburbs, sort of, I guess it's the suburbs, but yeah, I'm like, I'm only gonna want to go to New York City like maybe one time, maybe, and then just like because. But I
Yeah.
went there and I had this weird pull to it. I'm like, there's something about this that makes you want to come back, and I did not expect that at all.
Huh.
Yeah,
Like it's a little magnetic for you. Yeah.
yeah,
I've been to New York once for a visit, and I'll say that I mean, I love kind of the buzz of the city and the excitement. I mean, there's a lot of like, I mean, buzz very literally, like you just kind of you feel like
yeah,
you're kind of vibrating. um, and yet that gets so much from a sensory input perspective, the lights, the noise, the sensory perception of people being so close to you as you're walking down the streets. It's there's something really exciting about it, but for me a little overwhelming too. So I
yeah.
think I can do it in small doses.
That's where I am.
Um, yeah,
I was ready to go back. It's like
yeah.
a day there, and then it's like,
Like almost
let's go.
overstimulation might be the right word to describe how I felt when I got home. Like, whew, I need a break. In contrast to, I went to Vancouver recently, but I didn't stay in Vancouver. I went up to a place called Denman Island. I know a proprietor of a
Okay,
little B&B there called the Blue Owl, and that's
cool.
like a small island, you know, about 1,000-ish population, very kind of hippie-esque vibe, lots of nature, lots of hundreds-year-old trees, lots of wilderness, not a lot of animals notably, but it is an island. And it was so peaceful. I was like, well, I don't think I want to leave this state of mind ever. Like, do I actually have to go home?
Yeah,
Yeah, so who knows? Maybe I'll end up in the BC region of the world at some point in my life for a longer stay. I really,
DC's
really liked it
is
there.
huge.
It's a bit, yeah, I mean, naive American, I'll admit, in many
Yeah,
ways about at least geography, proximity kind of things in other countries. And I didn't realize how large BC is, or even how big the city is. Like I was like,
yeah,
wow, like it's not quite as big as New York, I don't think, but maybe Chicago. It was
yeah.
so I spent a little bit of time in the city and then
I mean,
ferried up to the island, and it was just such a cool experience.
and they have Stanley Park, which I think is the biggest park in the city in the
Mhm.
world, maybe.
Don't know.
I believe.
I'd be making it up if I answered.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I spent a lot of time, going and driving up through there. Went up one time. I had a show that was in this place called Bella Coola, which is up on the coast, almost in Alaska. And that was a drive. That was a drive up there. And then so we're gonna have a show there Friday night and Saturday. But we went up there, we got there Friday. But I mean, to get down to this place, it's like these switchback little
Yeah.
roads on a cliff, and we had it was snowy, and there was we had a trailer carrying the ring, and um, yeah, that was interesting. But then one of the people in the on the reservation died that day, so like everything was closed down on Friday. So then we ended up doing 2 shows on Saturday and taking off. But I did a lot of driving around BC, and I mean it's beautiful up there.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would there's a lot more to it than in Vancouver. And Vancouver Island's even huge. Vancouver Island is takes forever to drive through. And
Yeah. The phrase island, I think for me creates this assumption
Right.
of smaller, and it is not small.
no,
It
no,
is
it just keeps on going and going and going. It's the Energizer Bunny of land, I guess.
Yeah, we were gonna go. So the Denman Island it's a small ferry from Vancouver Island. Kind of think central Vancouver Island, central, north central, and we were gonna drive across to a beach campground in a city called Tofino. And unfortunately for
isn't that-
us,
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
unfortunately for us, the wildfires that are infecting Canada right now, there was a wildfire right on the road. And who knew, not this naive American at the time, that the roads, there's really only one way across, without, taking like log roads that aren't really well graded and are super, super dangerous. And so it would have been a 4-hour tour on unpaved, rocky log type roads.
Oh, no,
So
thanks.
we decided no, and we ended
Yeah.
up going to Nanaimo instead on the other side.
Oh,
and
okay.
I played around in there. I had the best Italian dinner I've ever had in my life, which was a lovely experience. Yeah, so Nanaimo, great Italian restaurant. Trattoria, I'd have to look it up. Maybe I'll give it to you for the show notes. Just plug
All
that little
right.
place in Nanaimo. It's like really, really
Yeah.
good Italian. I don't often say that. I'm kind of a foodie, so for me to say top 5 meals in my life, it's kind of a big deal.
So you know what? I think Minneapolis has one of the best food
Oh yes, we
scenes
do.
in the country. Right? Yep.
Don't tell people.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And that's something that I love about Minnesota was like, oh, don't come here. It's muggy all the time. It's freezing cold. And yeah, just mosquitoes everywhere. It's a terrible place. Don't go.
And all we eat is casserole.
Yep, just fucking hot dish.
Hot
And
dish. Tater tot
yeah,
hot dish.
yeah, tater tot hot dish. And the one thing though that Minneapolis didn't have though was the only complaint I had, which is there was no Mexican food that was good. That I didn't find it. I did have some in
It's
Austin,
so
but
hard.
in
It's so
Minneapolis,
hard.
same with
you come
Vancouver,
back-
BC.
If you
same
come
thing.
back, I will show you the 2 spots.
Okay, perfect.
There's 2 out of like 100 options. There's 2 where it's actually the perfect, perfect perfection of flavor combination and genuinely authentic. Not we call it authentic, but it's Tex-Mex.
Right.
Yeah.
Tex-Mex, hey, nothing wrong with Tex-Mex.
No, but call it what it is then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Tex-Mex, I'm a fan of those green chilies that they had. Living in Utah had some pretty good stuff. But I mean, yeah, come from the West Coast, Mexican food everywhere except for Vancouver. Vancouver, no Mexican food. Another one of those cities where amazing food, but there's just no Mexican food, and that's it. It's almost a deal breaker. But
There's a ton of incredible Asian cuisine there.
yeah, in Vancouver, absolutely.
I was
and,
like,
and
wow,
Indian.
like every corner.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's all good everywhere there except for Portland, because Portland has a horrible past with the Asian community.
They do.
If you ever want to look up the Shanghai tunnels or the being Shanghaied, I guess is you know about that? Have you heard of that?
Slightly. I dabble in just looking at some of that, the history of the way that we in America have had relationships with different populations as they've grown in the country.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I can remember the details, but I know there's quite a history with the Asian community post World War II. And there's a lot of sad stories there. And
Yeah.
like if you pass those along from generation to generation, there's certain cities you'd be telling your descendants not to live in.
Yeah, well, even before that, with so with this, like they would go. There's a whole tunnel system under downtown Portland, as there is in most large cities that it's still used for lots of nefarious shit. But so what they would do, uh,
I love the word nefarious.
yeah, I
Sorry,
do
keep
too.
going.
So
I love
for
it.
some of it though, like it was. So besides us fucking with Chinese people, so what would happen is at the bars, like they get people blackout drunk and then they take off their shoes and drop them down into the tunnels where there's broken glass all over. So they take off their shoes so they can't like go anywhere. And then before they wake up, they're on a slow boat to Shanghai to become, slaves. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah.
now that context, I was thinking more of slavery context and
Well,
indentured
yes, let slavery going
servitude.
the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Human trafficking the other way.
Human trafficking is still a huge thing in Portland.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sadly, in the whole freaking world.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty wild how much of that, because I mean, everywhere there's a tunnel system, there's usually very high likelihood of
Someone's using it for
of
something
trafficking,
nefarious.
right? Of something nefarious.
So
Yeah.
I think like because we were talking earlier about this division between humans, and like there's the 99 things that we agree on. And here's where I have sometimes a difficult time reconciling that same thing. Let's talk about human trafficking. On the surface, most of us would all likely very much agree that human trafficking is wrong, and we wish that people would be caught and charged accordingly, and that they would see justice for the crimes that they're committing against humanity. And yet, there's a market for it. So, who's buying, right? And that really, for the everyday people who agree that this is a terrible thing, like how do we stop this division baloney and start looking at like collectively these are the things that we agree are challenges in our society and we want to see them fixed, and how do we come together with ideas to create solutions and stop throwing our hands up and thinking the government is going to do something, because they certainly haven't yet. It's such a weird, it's just a really weird, I don't know if it's just where I am weird personally for me, or if it's just a weird time in history where it's like there's all this focus on what we don't agree on, and yet all this stuff that we do agree on that we're not coming together and saying this is wrong, we're going to stand up together and we're going to demand that we implement some solutions to this: homelessness, healthcare, human trafficking.
Right. That's the 99%
I
that
know.
like we're all agreeing on, and everyone's like, let's better the situation. This is all stuff that we want, but then something else. Nope. Then it, or else it becomes some especially with human trafficking, it's become some conspiracy that it's not real, I guess, or that's not really as bad as it is. That has been a hard one.
Yeah, I said to my son the other day, we have a lot of he's getting to the point where he loves to have some philosophical conversations with me.
Yeah.
And we were talking, somehow we ended up talking about Epstein's plane, whatever. I don't even know how we landed there. And kind of just theorizing like, oh, wouldn't anybody who was maybe not anybody who rode on the plane, but wouldn't anybody who went to that island then, if we believe that sex trafficking was happening on or through, or the transactions, for lack of a better way to phrase it, were happening on that island, wouldn't anyone who arrived at that island then kind of be a little guilty by proximity, like that they're endorsing it or turning a blind eye to it? And the people who visited are all over. And I think the conspiracy being they're all in it together, There might be some truth to that. I mean,
Right.
we don't know. We don't have a
Yeah.
way of knowing, but we're not all like the way we're going about trying to get answers is like we're fighting with each other about whether or not it's real. Like, isn't even a small amount of people being human trafficked enough of a thing for us to just all be outraged about it and try to get to the bottom of it and fix it instead of, I don't think you're right about how it's happening or how many people are effective or how bad it is for the world. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Like, I mean, go ask, anyone on a reservation, ask about how they think about human trafficking,
Yeah,
or
look up the Red Dress Project.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And the day where the most people are human trafficked is Super Bowl
Super Bowl
Sunday.
Sunday.
And the one of the places where most people are trafficked is Disney World, Disneyland.
Mhm.
And I mean,
Yeah.
you think this is something that like everyone's like, hey, this is something we should all like, hey, look out for people, yes, yeah. But and I remember back in like 2017, I went on my friend's radio show and I was talking about, I probably shouldn't have been doing this, but like
Dun, dun, dun.
yeah, I mean, even with like on those Epstein flights with uh Bill Clinton, like even like best case scenario, he went onto the plane to go to the island and requested that an underage girl give him a foot massage. That's the absolute best scenario of what happened with just that. And that's just kind of like the tip of that iceberg. And that's, I mean,
And that's just one person.
that's one
Right?
person.
That's
Right.
one person. Right. And I
And
think like,
yeah. And I assume Epstein was the fall guy for whatever else is going on too. I assume there's a lot more.
Absolutely so, though. I mean, like
That's
you fall guy, there should have been a lot more people falling. I'll give you
yeah,
that. But that fall guy, I think that the fact that he committed suicide, I think many of us all agree that there's some question around whether that was it. I kind of have
right.
been theorizing with my son. Like, he's like, I think so and so had him murdered. I'm like, I think so and so did. It's like, what if it was
Yeah.
the queen?
So
like
there's the whole royal family thing, and I mean that's
a whole
they're
other thing.
yeah,
Yeah, but we all agree it's wrong. We all think it's bad, and yet
right,
somehow they're still customers.
right, and it's more lucrative than the drug trade of the world,
So messed up.
and I mean, that's probably why so much of it is pushed to divide us more rather than letting us unite to
Yeah.
if everybody in the world was like, hey, this is something that's fucked up, let's go work on this, then that's one thing. Or like, hey, let's have everyone fight against about something else, or think that this is just some loony thing and it's only happening in small things, but it's
We're too busy trying to pay the bills to care, Rusty.
yeah, right,
So
yeah, it's yeah. And so I mean, I hope at some point there's something
too.
that changes with it. Like, I mean, yeah. Well, so like my other co-host, uh, him and he had another show, and that's kind of how like we all started hanging out, and like we started going down like this whole thing with uh this donut shop that has now a lot of donut shops, uh and one of them being the main one in Portland. There were a lot of connections, and that the place is right over the tunnels. And
shall we call it Donut Gate?
well, we can call it Donut Gate. And yeah, like a lot of the people that were on the board for something else before that also had been probed in that
Yeah.
that scene. And yeah, and it's like, oh, you guys are, yeah, but there's there's a lot of truth to it, and I wish there wasn't. I wish it was some weird thing that someone like thought up, but it's not.
Yeah, or at
Not
least
something that's
like
happening.
don't just call people crazy because they think something bad's going on. Investigate, show the evidence. Like I think
Right.
that we're all craving more transparency as we get these talking points. Doesn't matter where they're coming from. We get this very high level clickbaity headline about what's going on in the world. And
Yeah.
then regardless of where not all, but the vast majority of the places that are giving us those headlines are not going, and here's and here's this study, and here's the investigation, and here's this paper, and mounting the evidence. I think we see the same thing with just criminal allegations against people or whatever. I think we as a population are now craving much more transparency. And yet we're also very easily distracted by like, here's proof. And like, it's like we've lost to some degree, because there's so much coming at us all the time, our ability to discern like, what's the source of this? Who funded this? How long is there multiple bodies of evidence supporting this theory? Because a lot of times people are talking a theory like they're fact. I think maybe you and I may have been guilty of that today.
Yeah. Well, maybe not.
maybe not, right? But I think it sounds like the two of us are very open to like, well, we'll change our minds if we see evidence to the otherwise, and we're
I'd be
not going
happy
to
to.
assume that we're right. Like that's anyhow.
Yeah.
I'm curious, just in terms of like your podcast, you and I, before we hopped on this mic, we didn't really chat a lot of like, who's listening to your show? Who's your show for? What do we want to make sure that they walk away from today? I've got to hop for another. I don't think we were not good we were not good at planning this together. I don't
Which
think,
is
because
what the show's like.
like how, I think that part was clear to me, but like, how long are we supposed to be on? Because
Hours usually good. So this
hours.
works out
Okay.
well. So this is great.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of I don't know. There's a lot of different people and it's been hard to like really be able to market to a specific person. The numbers are there, but it's like when I look at the data, it's
Yeah, they want to hear they want to hear it all. So we're just going to have
all
all sorts
over.
of conversations.
Yeah,
Perfect.
right.
Yeah.
So it kind of works. All different kinds of people. It's
Yeah.
weird, but it's how I like it, and that's there's people who are going to enjoy it, people who aren't, and there's
It's a variety show. I
podcasts for
love it.
everyone.
I love a good variety show.
What about your show?
It's a bit more focused. I work in a number of different ways, but one of the hats I wear is as a self-discovery mindset coach. Based on my own personal life experience, I had to go through a bunch of self-discovery work and created a method. It works great. Decided to start a podcast really tailored to women in recovery. It's called Ambitious Addicts, but I do a little bit of discussion of my own personal recovery experience from addiction, and then a little bit of like, here's some coaching tips for self-inquiry, and a lot of lived experience interviews with women who are in recovery, all addictions, all pathways to healing. I don't think there's a right way to recover. So it's kind of it's an addiction variety show. And we always end with a dose of hope. Usually I'm talking to people who've gone on and created some incredible things in their lives as a result of finding recovery.
That's important to see too. And yeah.
Hey, people who are suffering in silence, they need hope.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when people want to contact you and find your work and everything, how are they going to go about doing that?
I'm guilty right now of like trying to juggle a lot and I'm dropping lots of balls and trying to preserve the glass ones. So look up Ambitious Addicts podcast, obviously, if that's an appealing podcast to you, anywhere you listen. If you want to chat about anything else like Rusty and I have today and just talk about life in the world together, my personal Facebook, and I've given you the link for that. You can drop it in the show notes. People can reach out. And I post. Yeah. I'm an open book. I post a lot publicly, and I'm happy to engage with people through Messenger there too, or my email, Terra, TERRA, at theselfdiscoverysisterhood.com.
All right. And then you said also about a nonprofit.
Yeah. Told you I'm juggling a lot. So prior to starting self-employment, which is has been a really fun adventure. I 20 years in a recruiting profession, and as of late, the last several years, I've really honed in and focused on helping organizations, nonprofit organizations, hire executive leadership teams with an eye to inclusivity and diversity first in our approach to hiring.
Is that include grant writers?
It sure does.
Will you send me a message afterwards?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, that organization's name is KP Companies. kpcompanies.com would always have our postings. But yeah, we're always happy to have conversations with people who might be discreetly trying to make a move and see if we can open up some door to opportunity for them.
Yeah, I have a 501c3, so that would be looking for another grant writer. Never hurts to have too many grant writers. So
or resources to help you find great people.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, Terra, I really enjoyed getting to talk to you.
Such a pleasure. We might have to do this again.
I think we should. Yeah. I have a 3-month thing, so probably 3 months from now. So whatever that is, November, somewhere in there, we'll get you booked again. Because I
really enjoyed the discussion, and I heard a lot in this conversation that we could probably have spent an hour on. We could probably spend an hour on wrestling and me being a kid learning about Jerry Blackwell and
a crusher. All right. Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, such a pleasure to get time with you. Thanks so much for having me on this show, Rusty.
Likewise. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you. All right. That's Terra Carbert. So give her a follow. Yeah. I like talking with her. That was fun. I didn't know where we were going. So we got there, and there's a lot we could have talked about. And she's going to talk about Minnesota wrestling. I can talk about that for a while. Start talking about, start talking about Playboy Buddy Rose or Colonel De Beers, even starting there. Always good stuff. So thank you everyone so much for listening here on the Quantum Global Broadcasting Network, QGBN. Check out other shows on the network, such as When the Gloves Come Off, the Thinking Man's Pro Wrestling Podcast, This Is It with Lizzie, and Saved by the Ben. The show is sponsored by Fred Ben Savage as Fuck, Stoner Eats Productions, Hardcore Entertainment, Hypnosis is Great, and Sock 'em Up. Check out Sock 'em Out, sockemup.org. And that's where you can find out about the 501c3 I was just talking about. And that is the show, man. Boom.
It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker. It's Rusty Diamond, motherfucker.
Ernest! Ernest!
Yes, Pee-wee.
You brought the snacks, right?